We're going to start the lecture. So thank you for coming. I think we'll start with Greg, and we want you to talk a little bit about your work and then also about where you went to school, and tell us about this project and how it got started and the whole process, because I think it's really an interesting story.
Probably started going up into the mountains, the San Gabriel Mountains, to hike, probably in the mid-20s, and I remember just being kind of blown away by the beauty of it all. Prior to that, I was, my wife and I lived in Santa Monica, and I would just kind of walk around the neighborhood and photograph the landscaping. And I went, this is back before I had a digital camera, I would basically get the film back for prints, and I would paint out everything but the nature. And so I would use that as a sketch to make landscape paintings. And I was thinking of it as being a kind of a modern take on landscape painting, sort of pop landscape. And it was interesting because here in Southern California, if you look at any of the landscape, residential or commercial landscaping, it's all like plants from somewhere else. In a way that mirrors the population. It's like most of the population of Los Angeles is actually from somewhere else. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting take. But I started to get kind of bored with it. I was doing like also images of Ikebana, so I collected books on Ikebana and bonsai. And it was really about these examples of nature being used to create an image of nature. And so that what you're looking at is nature, it's natural, but it's designed. It's like in Ikebana, everything's kind of made to look kind of random, but there are all these diagrams for how to arrive at that asymmetry. And I thought that was interesting in relation to painting, because I kind of came from this very gestural approach to making paintings. And at some point I kind of started getting very self-conscious of my gestures, because I thought, well, I'm trying to make it look random, but I'm very designed about how I arrive at that place. And I started feeling kind of uncomfortable about that. And when I kind of stumbled on Ikebana, it was like, well, wait a minute, this is being done. It's being done without irony. And I thought, I like that. I like this relationship between things that happen natural and things that happen by design. And so that became kind of my thing for a while. But I thought of it as being very different from, say, like a landscape painter who goes into the mountains and paints this very sublime, pristine landscape, which I thought, well, that's how they did it, back in the day. And so, but going up into the mountains, it was kind of like, I just was just completely taken by it up there in the San Gabriels. And I started taking pictures thinking, well, I can make some paintings from this. And we had a big fire in 2009 called the Station Fire that just burned like hundreds of thousands of acres. And I remember going up there afterwards and going to some of the areas where I had photographed and seeing how it had changed and taking some comparative photographs and being able to kind of juxtapose them and just kind of really hit home like, well, this could all just be gone. And so I started kind of going there more and documenting all these different pine trees that were very interesting to me, that were kind of like bonsais, and that they had this sort of expressiveness and character. And what I would do is I'd use a digital camera, come home, get it on Photoshop, and just paint out everything but the tree, so that I have it's just kind of a digital capture of just a tree. And I have like folders now filled with just hundreds of these things. And I always bring my GPS locator so I can take the location of it, and then I can always go back to it. I know exactly where each tree is. And so, but I do follow up every few years to each tree just to make sure it's still there. And some trees just die on, naturally. But occasionally we have these big fires, like we had the Bobcat fire in 2020, and that really burned up quite a bit of the area where I had been documenting trees. And so I've been kind of busy going back and re-documenting the trees now in their new state. And then we had the bridge fire, and it's like 2024 once again. That was the area kind of right above Wrightwood where I had done quite a bit of the trees. And that whole area is just completely burned. And it's there are a few areas up in the mountains that haven't been burned yet, and so it's not like I'm hoping for it, but it's kind of like I feel I have to document it. And even after the trees have been burned, it's there's still this process that they go through. Like usually when a tree gets burned, it's just the outer trunk and all the pine needles and everything, and it's just standing there in this stark black figure of a tree, and over time the bark actually falls off, and you have this actually sort of bleached kind of trunk. And so there's all this process, and eventually that tree, once the bark falls off, all the termites and woodpeckers get in there and peck away at it, and eventually the tree falls down and becomes part of the soil. So it's just, there's tons of documentation of it too. And, but this documentation part of it has actually become a thing in itself as a part of my project. But originally the idea was just to go up there and get photographs of these trees that I could use as source materials in my paintings. I do these paintings that are very, what I call staged, or staged landscapes. So I have a horizon that just functions as a stage, and then I arrange the trees in different ways. And I have some examples of kind of how I sort of work. It's like I usually kind of will figure out a tree that is sort of my like star tree, and then I find like another tree that is like a sort of a supporting actor that can go next to it. And I try it in different relationships to the trees, and I do this with hundreds of different trees to kind of eventually get to a point where then when I'm figuring out a composition, I can, okay, now I can add like a third tree or a fourth tree. And so I start doing things that are a little bit more composed into more complicated compositions. And so I'm doing this with this like, it's kind of very methodical and obsessive, but this is how I kind of work. And anyways, that's, I guess that's sort of it in a nutshell. It's like I still have so much work to do. So
Now you had been, you told me earlier that you had been really working on this body of work for about 15 years and really haven't shown it in a commercial gallery.
I'm kind of, in a way, my work is almost more about preparation, because I spend so much time, even just making like a painting, like when I'm finally come to a composition, and I usually do everything with masking tape. So I design it on the computer, and then I make these very complex stencils that take a long time to make, and then it's like I apply the stencil to the panel. That takes a long time, and then the actual painting doesn't take very long at all. And then it's like painstakingly taking each section of the stencil off. It takes a long time. So any other painter would just make the painting. But I kind of have this way of drawing out every little part of making a painting out, from getting the source material to designing it to prepping the actual painting. And it's kind of a really stupid way of working, but it's my way of working. So it's like, I kind of realized, well, it's like, I'm kind of stuck with this. There's been times where I've cursed myself for kind of, why did I come up with this, but I'm actually kind of, I really like how I work. And so I'm kind of, this is my thing. And the paintings will come out looking in a way that I think is kind of different from other people's paintings, if nothing else. So
it's kind of interesting. You said you started out as a gestural painter. It couldn't be more different than gestural, right? They're just.
It depends. I mean, what I'm showing here is just like really a part of my work. I mean, I'm kind of, I don't have necessarily a style. Like I work in a lot. I I have lots of different ways of making work, and I have work that's completely abstract. That would fit actually really nicely into this show, actually.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I'm not really, like, the art world kind of wants us to just do one thing over and over and over again, and I'm not very good at that. Like, I'm not going to do it. I'm just
Fight
gonna, well, and this guy right here is the reason why, because I've always been a big fan of yours. Back when I was in college, I remember looking at your work and thinking, he's the weirdest fucking artist of all. Like,
Get a style.
and so whenever I get sort of stuck in a way of, okay, this is the work I'm doing now, and everybody knows it, it's like, but I want to do something else, I always think, what would David Lloyd do?
Well, it's the curse of painters. You know, there's artists that, is that Tim over there?
Yeah.
Hey, well, we went to Cal Arts and everybody did everything. You know, there were people like Mike Kelly who do sculpture, this and that, and they play drums, and they do all this stuff. The painters have been pushed into this thing where they're supposed to come up with something and just keep repeating it ad nauseum, and I think we all should fight that.
Well, I don't know, see, because I think I always remember when I was in Claremont, there was this one visiting artist, what was his name, John Miller, remember this guy?
Yeah,
Who did the
sure.
dashes?
Network
And,
never changed.
Yeah, and you would think that they were all the same if you just looked at them, but if you look at them, actually they were.
Well, he
very-
had his little.
Yeah, there were these subtle little differences in each painting, and it was like, but he did that for years and years and years, and I thought, well, that's the integrity of the work, is that he's kind of stuck with this thing, and it's like, I always wanted to do that, I just found I couldn't, you know? And so it's not like a criticism, I think that if what works for you works, so.
Well, I moved his art when I got out of school, when I was art moving. And I said to him, do you ever just want to just throw the yellow paint on one of them? He just looked at me like,
He was, he had a very.
he was very like, yeah, that's.
It was serious business.
I know if he ever used like a little dark blue, it was like, oh my God.
Right.
Well,
Well,
he got very excited about that. It was not black. It was
I know, it's like,
I think it's just the way artists, everybody's brain works differently. That's the beauty of it. They all just work in a different way.
But that's the one thing I always really liked about your work, is that it didn't neatly fit into this category or that. So it always seemed like, to me, you were always doing your own weird thing.
I think it's a little bit, I've settled down in my old age, but I think it's a little ADD-ish in a way. It's sort of like you get bored and you move on, but it's not, I wouldn't recommend it as a career path. Like you said.
Arnold doesn't want.
Although there are, Richter and these people have sort of done a lot of different stuff. And it's just.
Well, how about going to Claremont, and when did you go, and who were your influences there? And
Well, it was the mid-90s, which was, I like to think of LA in the 90s, early 20-aughts as being kind of one of the best periods in LA. It's like, I think there was just a lot of great painting going on and a lot of great stuff happening. But I remember, I went there because Roland was teaching there, Roland Reiss, and Lisa Adams was teaching there, and John Millay and David Amico. I didn't work that well with David Amico. I never got along with him, but I hit it off with John Millay, even though he was kind of a egomaniacal person. I really enjoyed his ability to look at a painting and talk about it, and it was like, other people would kind of talk around it, and he would go right into it, and Roland was always fun. The very first meeting we had, he kind of comes in, looks at his cup of coffee, looks at my work, he looked at me and goes, "So you want to be famous?" And I'd never heard a teacher ever ask me something like that. I was like, like, you're not supposed to say yes, right? I'm like, I said, I want to be successful, but the idea of fame makes me think of myself being up on a stage and everybody staring at me and that kind of like this. And that makes me really uncomfortable. And then he goes, oh, okay, well, I just thought I'd ask. And then we kind of went on to talk about something else, and it was like, is he doing this with everybody? Is this like this icebreaker? And I asked around, and nobody else had that same thing.
But fuck yeah.
I can show you how. It's a sign here. Like the devil or something. But no, and so we had lots of different conversations. There was this one, he was in the full abstraction camp at that point, and I was always kind of on the fence. And I remember he kind of said, look, Greg, there's more freedom in abstraction. And I just laughed at him and said, are you kidding me, right? It's like there's all these rules and regulations now on what it is to be a real abstractionist. And it's like, I don't feel that in pictorial painting. It's like you can be a really sloppy pictorial painter or super neat, but nobody questions that's not pictorial enough. It's like, but in abstraction, it's kind of like this exclusive club. You're saying there's freedom in that? And we kind of argued about that a bit. But I think I should note that, like, after I got out, I started doing these paintings of flowers, of like Ikebana, and eventually he caught up with me too. So.
It's like,
No, I have a lot of respect for him. He was kind of like my favorite teacher, and his paintings were amazing. And I miss him. I have like there's times when I'm just in my studio kind of working and I'll think of something he said, and it's like he's still kind of with me, It's like this, certain teachers you have that kind of just stick with you. So.
All right, well, thank you. And I want to segue to Alex, since you also went to Claremont, and to talk a little bit about your work and your experience at Claremont, and who some of your mentors were there.
Okay.
In any kind of order you want to do it in.
Which would you like me to start with, Claremont?
Why don't you start with Claremont?
Okay, cool. So I'm currently at Claremont. I'm graduating in the spring. Everyone should come to my thesis show. It's sometime in March or something like that. But I'm really excited about the work I'm making there. I have great teachers like Julian Hoper, Rachel Latrowitz, Michael Rep Snyder, and a bunch of other teachers whose last names I can't pronounce, but they're really awesome. You should look it up because it's a really underrated place that doesn't get enough exposure to this kind of outside of Los Angeles, but like it's a really cool place. So I kind of I applied to all the fancy schools on the East Coast and I didn't get into any of them, unfortunately. But I got like close to getting in, but I didn't get fully in. And I'm just so happy where I am as a grad student at Claremont. It's just like the best school for me and for artists in general. I think there's a lot of good friends I have there who are great artists and teachers that I mentioned before. Yeah.
And so about your work, I see like sort of figurative elements and abstraction. I kind of really like the way that you balance those two, and what do you have anything sort of to say about that?
I mean, like, when I'm creating the work, when I'm making the original conceptions, and then I cut up compositions, I'm thinking in a relatively abstract way. I'm feeling in an abstract way. I'm feeling the tensions. I'm feeling the release. I'm feeling like bulges. I'm feeling things colliding together. And I'm thinking about line work. But in the back of my head, I'm also thinking about anatomy and body parts and like the fragility and weight of the body and like how it relates to playing basketball, for example, here. So it's kind of autobiographical because I used to play. So it's just all about those kind of things, and like there's just a lot. It's for me, it's like fertile ground to like just expand outwards from.
And do you did you do a lot of drawing before you went to grad school?
I mean, I still do, but yeah. Drawing. I mean, the root of my practice is drawing. I don't have a particular order in which I work, but it always seems like I start off with some sort of drawing at a smaller scale, and then I just blow it up or like just figure out the exact dimensions I'd like the painting to be, just depending on how like the tonality of the line work, the tonality of the charcoal or thin veils of oil paint in the back, or the basketball or anything like that. I'm just trying to make fun of cool work more than anything else. Like I'm trying to excite myself. I'm also trying to connect with like a pure part of myself that's like somewhat connected to like nature, or like, because even this looks like a landscape a bit, or like tree limbs or something like that. So it comes with that same sort of fragility and caring for the world and things like that.
Now, do you make, is it just spontaneous, or do you make drawings and then make paintings?
Kind of both. Like, I would say for this one, it was spontaneous. I really just, I'm a process artist, even though like my work is deeply conceptual. So I would always end up surprising myself, and it makes itself, and that's really exciting. Like I'm feeling the tensions, and I'm feeling how it feels, and then I just see, oh, there's a leg, there's an arm, there's a basketball. And I'm just like, it's all about the process for me. It's all
So
about,
when you started this painting, did you know it was going to be a basketball painting?
when I started the drawing for this painting, I didn't know it was gonna be a basketball. I just thought body parts, basketball, things I enjoyed.
So you discovered the basketball thing in the middle of doing a drawing that you didn't know was going to be this painting.
Yeah.
But then, so you have a drawing that precedes this,
Yes.
it's smaller.
Done with a pen and charcoal. This is done with oil paint, all oil paint.
So then this, it doesn't start as a blank canvas and you approach it.
No, it doesn't start as a blank canvas.
And-
It started as a drawing. I use an overhead projector often, or I
Okay.
can reference images. Things like that.
Okay.
Because they're big drawings, is where they work.
Yeah.
You know, they feel as much like a painting as a big giant drawing.
Yeah. They work at all different scales.
Yeah.
Like some of them make them tiny, some of them make them huge. It's like, interesting.
So is that a deflated basketball?
I think so. Some sort of distortion of the body, like it's dealing with gravity and weight. It's like heavy and light all at the same time. Like it's pushing the body parts down, the body parts are pushing it up. I don't know.
But it's a basketball, right?
Yeah,
And
the basketball's
in
pushing
motion.
them. Sorry?
In motion.
In motion, yes, yeah.
Is that why it's so flat then? Because it's in motion?
I never thought of that. Yeah, no, but it's just like this heavy and light thing all at the same time, kind of brittle almost.
But what did you think when you saw it so elliptical?
I just thought.
Or was that like that in the
I think-
drawing? It was elliptical in the drawing?
Yeah. But like when I made the drawing,
Because that's kind of a fun idea.
yeah, I just like when I'm just like when I'm thinking about his body parts, tensions, abstraction, and like good job, like keep going. That's what goes on in my head. I give myself like a good response back. Yeah.
This is like the tapping into the late 90s, early 20s. This was the thing. Like before, it seemed like everybody had to have the fucking reason to make a painting. And it was like, I remember the whole critical theory thing. Everybody was like reading this boring ass text, in order to kind of inform their work. And it was like, all of a sudden in the 90s, it became like, no, you don't need that. Just have your own stupid reason for making a painting. And it was kind of like, and that made it exciting again. Like all of a sudden painting got fun and interesting because artists didn't feel like they had to do what the instructors were telling them to do.
Yeah, it's just so weird that Claremont. It's not like the school where they're preaching to you.
Yeah,
Or,
that was one of the reasons why I went to Claremont was because it seemed like a place where they actually welcome painters. Like a lot of other schools back then were kind of like, no, painting's dead. It's kind of like, you had to kind of, if you were going to paint, you better have some pretty good reasons to. And it was much more. It's good to know it's still like I didn't know Michael Reiss was there. He's amazing.
He's awesome.
Yeah. And Rachel was fantastic. Like I was there in her first semester and I didn't vote. I don't know if you guys vote on it. We used to vote on the incoming faculty and students. And like I didn't vote for her because I thought, well, she's not going to teach. What am I going to learn from her? And it was like, but she was great. I just thought she was like, she had a way of going into no matter who we were or whose studio, she could go in there and find exactly what you needed to she could pinpoint stuff like so quickly, and which was so perceptive and fun. Like she had energy that some of the other teachers like didn't have. You can hope he doesn't watch this.
So Gary, now we'll ask you about where you went to school, and your work, and I really wanted to say that Gary was pretty much the inspiration for doing this show. I saw his work, and I really thought he was doing the best work that I've ever seen him do, and maybe he did other work that I didn't see that's better, but I really, really like this body of work, and I've known Gary for probably close to 30 plus years. And so then the idea came around to like, okay, how do we just make the show around that? And I thought an interesting idea would be to mix and match some younger artists that are still in school and some veteran artists that are long graduated. And so this is kind of what we have here. And so it's an interesting mix. And I always like it to do these mixes where you kind of don't know which one is the older artist and which one's the younger. The older artists are making young work, the younger artists are making mature work. So I was really happy with the outcome. And so anyways, tell us about your new work from the last couple of years. And
I think you're right. I think it's the best work I've ever done. I'm really proud of it. And I went to UCLA, got my BA in 74, and my MFA in 77. And the 70s were a great time in the art school. At least at UCLA. It was a great time. I mean, I look back on those years with just so much happiness. It was I loved the faculty. I became friends with a lot of faculty. Bill Reiss and Sam Amato and Elliot Elgar and Les Miller. Les was up there. It was a school that was really, it was about painting. I think I was actually signed up to study with David Lloyd for my first class, but he didn't come back after he had gone on sabbatical because he had had a show in Marlborough in London and did really well. But I wound up having, working, my first teachers were all new realists because that was happening back then. And it was a great foundation, learning how to paint figuratively. But I really loved abstraction. I always liked Miro and genre art when I was first looking at art. I like simple organic forms. I like the color. And UCLA, Diebenkorn's influence was huge. A lot of these guys I just mentioned, they were all really interested in color. They were, everybody, they were, interesting, smart, funny people. I really enjoyed getting to know all of them. But the influence of Diebenkorn was huge, and a lot of those guys were really interested in modernism, coming up. I think Matisse was a big hero for a lot, and so they really loved, and as he was for Diebenkorn, they loved color, and there wasn't an exact way to paint, at least not my experience. Everybody was pretty happy to let you do whatever you wanted to do, and it was actually, the attitude back then was kind of very non-professional. Most of, at least the faculty that the older faculty that I was connected with, they were people who sort of had an anti-professional attitude. They thought they didn't help you figure out how to get into the gallery system. They didn't encourage you to do work that was going to be commercial. They encouraged you to stretch yourself, to make paintings that push the boundaries of what painting could be. And so, the new realists, those guys, if you wanted to be one of them, you were going to try to paint like a photograph. Well, that's pretty clear how to do that. But to paint abstractly and to try to stretch it, that could be a lot of things. So anyway, I look back on that period really, really fondly. Exciting time to just do whatever I could do. Chad Fairbeating was another teacher of mine, and I was close with Chaz too. And he just said, me, because I had a sort of goofiness in some of my work. He said, don't ever lose that. Keep the goofiness. So,
And when did you first start kind of forming this work? And
so this stuff sort of, it was a slow process, and there are hints of some elements in here were always in my work. I always had an ability. I mean, I had at different times in the 50 plus years I've been painting, I could do pretty obsessive stuff, and then I could do pretty minimal stuff. So actually, my work probably just before COVID was kind of minimal. It was structured. There was a kind of like a simple kind of grid-like structure that I was dealing with, but there were maybe 18 or 20 shapes, something like that. Not that many, and I was just trying to find a kind of balance and a Zen-like quality that seemed alive, and gradually I took that kind of grid-like thing and I just made it more complicated, and I started connecting a lot of the corners of all these gridded shapes, and with a loopy kind of line that would meander all over the place. And so the work 2 or 3 years ago wasn't as complex as it is now, but I just kept on finding ways to divide these forms more and more so that they just all seemed energized, and that I could see a little line here would sort of relate to a little line there, would relate to a little line there. And there'd be all this kind of way just to, I don't know, to me, I think the idea when you make a painting is that you're going to make something that's going to engage the viewer. And I want to be engaged when I look at my work. I want to be engaged when I look at anybody's work. And if a work keeps on providing me with some kind of entertaining movement throughout, that I'm just continually looking around the work, finding new surprises, then I think, well, what could be better than that? So I'm trying to make the work so that my eye is just running, is sort of, there's a resonance that just sort of pulls me to look all over the picture and discover new things, and to feel like I'm seeing different kind of events everywhere I look, so that there's a lot, you get a lot of payoff. The more your eye wanders around, the more you find good stuff. That's what I'd like the viewer to feel when they see my work. I'd like it to be something that you can look at for a really long time and always find new things. So I think that's what art should be. It should be something that you're always, if you really like it, you should want to come back to it and understand it a little more and find more things in the painting that resonate with you.
Yeah, earlier you told me that you had you were a math major and what else before you?
I started UCLA as a math major, then I switched to psychology, and then I switched to art. So I didn't really take any art classes till the last quarter of my sophomore year. And I applied to get into the art department at that time, and they didn't accept me because you had to switch from the letters and science to fine art. And they said, oh, just take some classes. So over the summer, I took beginning drawing and figure drawing. And I took the first painting class in fall, and applied. Then I got in, and then when I had to go to graduate school, I was like, they were only accepted 5 people out of 300. So I figured out what they wanted to see. Yes.
And do you feel that your math background, or do you feel that it has anything?
It may be there in some. I love geometry, and my teachers when I was in high school, they liked me in geometry because I'd figure out problems intuitively, not using the textbook answer to get the right answer. But I like that. But I was actually here with a couple of old friends the other day, and they said to me, the work seems more musical than mathematical.
Oh,
And
interesting.
well, that's interesting too. And yeah, we were speaking earlier. I actually did play piano pretty well, and I played a couple of other instruments. So I think music is a big part of my life as well. And I think music and math are connected.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting to me that they always, a Pollock has all these ways you can find things in it, but the way he gets there is completely different.
Yeah.
These are that's gestural, is mechanical.
Yeah.
Like the way he's taking you know, kind of almost mechanical means to get to a place where there's all this stuff going on that you find your way through, but there's no gesture at all.
No.
It's all painted, bit by bit.
Although I would
like
say-
animals.
A little earlier on there, it was not really
You're
just
drawing
building,
this?
but it's a little,
You're drawing it?
yeah, they're not quite as tight as the way they resolve.
Yeah. Everybody, he's using the projector, I'm using an artificial means. There's a lot of artifice going on around here, which I think is a sign of the times. You know.
But I don't know, I imagine in your work too, even though you're using the computer, you're still adjusting a lot of stuff.
Oh, well, I'm like you, I'm starting out really, really gesturally, like wildly gesturally, and then
Yeah.
little by little
Yeah,
coming into it.
yeah, and then you're evaluating it, and you're speculating.
Yeah, oh,
Okay, how can this be better?
All
Maybe I
along
should
the way.
try this and that.
yeah.
So we're not
I
pre-planned.
mean, the thing about working with the computer, it's like some people think, well, it's this very rigid thing, but it's so crazy loose, right? And it's like everything when you're working on it, what I've noticed is that you just save stuff, like, cause you get to this place in a composition where it's like, wow, that's really cool. I want to go further. So you save it, and then you keep producing like alternatives, and alternatives like more than you would without a computer. If you were just painting or drawing, you might settle on something. But in the computer, you just keep, it's like what people said about, oh, a computer's gonna make your life easier. No, it just makes you work more. It's like,
I would have to say though, for myself, I've done some murals and I've done some prints based on computer, all this stuff. But the problem I have with computers, everything looks good. And you can't, with paint, it can look really bad.
Yeah.
That's why I like painting better. I think painting's hard to do.
Well, yeah, and the computer is just a means to get to a point for some artists. It's not it's not the end product for you. It's a means to an end.
I have some things that exist only virtually, kind of like on the computer, like I would have to print them out. But then it's a print, and it's kind of like a digital print. But I have like where I scan, for instance, organic blobs of paint, and then I get them in Photoshop, and there's tools like where you can stretch the paint out again, make it malleable again.
Yeah.
And so it's like, but it's always just this virtual thing,
Yeah,
you know.
it's really easy, but but I've done it too, you know. And actually, I think having
You're trying to
used
make things hard.
Yeah. Well, you know, I pride myself on that. The work is really hard to do.
It's hard to make any work.
And I always tell my students too, but painting's hard.
Painting's hard. Yeah, it is.
Oh,
It
really?
is.
I teach at Brentwood Art Center.
Oh, yeah.
Private school.
Yeah.
But I also think about, this, I think having learned Photoshop and I've used it a lot, I don't use it in these works, but if I've done printmaking, some of the prints I've done, I've worked with a publisher and I've used that as my means of getting into the image. But thinking in terms of layers, I wouldn't have made these paintings if I hadn't worked with layers in Photoshop. Because I think they make you think about this kind of overlap stuff in a different way than you could before the computer was invented.
See, this is interesting because I was thinking as I was coming here, I was thinking, well, in case Karl doesn't have like some kind of structure for how he's going to arrange this talk, I'm just going to jump in there with a question. I'm going to ask these four artists, in a group show, what would you say? How is abstraction different today than it was in the last century? Because we went from this sort of, we were in this kind of cluttered room with all this stuff in history, and we found an opening and we went through it, and the next room was like completely empty. It was like 21st century. And it was like, how did we fill that up? And is it different now? Like, can you say, we're at this place with abstraction that is where it wouldn't have happened like this in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but it's like this is totally unique. And when you were talking about the AI,
I think that's the problem right now. I was reading an article about the preponderance or the amount of gestural, like de Kooning-esque abstract painting that's been done by a lot of younger artists right now, that just looks like,
If you go on Instagram, you see so much
Just-
that
it all
looks
looks
like the
like-
same guy.
like that, and it's not like what Dena's doing, which is super totally structured and
Yeah.
building form and all this stuff. This stuff's just free form, and it's funny because I don't know. There's a there at the end it said about that, and he said it's stranger still that such lowered expectations for painting's formal development has been normalizing for nearly a decade now. In other words, artists, I feel like a lot of artists, painters, are not pushing the envelope. That's how I feel when I look out in the world, because I mean, for me, it's the most interesting part of making art is just to sort of see where this thing goes. And we had like modernism, then we had postmodernism, then we had like, I don't know what this is, postmodernism, where a 23-year-old kid will make a de Kooning painting and it'll end up in somewhere like Werner. That's been done, that's 75 years old, that vocabulary he's using, or she or whoever. And I feel like in painting, I think painters are getting lazy, myself, and not trying to expand the boundaries of what this thing can do. And I really do think that's my opinion. I'm a grumpy old guy, but that's how it feels to me, because, and I don't mean they have to do, it doesn't have to be one thing or another. It's not about abstraction or figuration. It's more about this idea of invention, of always trying to read. Maybe that's an old view of the world.
Well, one of the things about Otis, where I'm going, is that a lot of my teachers say to me, like, I want to see something I haven't seen before.
And I want to see something I
And I'm
haven't seen
really coming
before.
from that kind of place,
Yeah.
which
Right.
is like, I want to see, work that hasn't been seen before.
Right.
Like, how do you push the boundaries of painting to the next level, and then, what does that mean to the boundaries, to the canvas?
Yeah, and I think like that painting you made is a very strange painting. It doesn't really, the big one, yeah, yours.
Oh,
It doesn't fall into one category or another. It sort of is I talk about like a liminal space between a bunch of stuff, and that's interesting. I'm not picking on any one artist or another. I'm just saying that there's a lot of stuff that's rehashing old vocabularies, just sort of.
Well, the reason why I kind of brought that up is because you had mentioned how you wouldn't have made the painting the same way unless you had experienced like layers. And so there is this one thing we could talk about is how, like, I was in a show at Acme back in 2002 called The New Economy Painting. It was all artists that were using the computer somehow to make painting. But even back then, it was kind of like frowned upon, like how like using photography used to be frowned on, it's kind of like to make a painting. And, but it's not the issue anymore. I mean, artists are kind of jumping into it. But I mean, I remember people having a real negative, attitude about the computer. And you're using AI. AI is just going to crack open so many
I think
things
it is.
in a negative way.
In a positive way, negative way, but there was a show called, I think it was called Post-Human and Deutsch Project, and it was wild, and it was using all the, AI and sculpture and everything. But interestingly, the most interesting work was actually sculpture. There wasn't a lot of painting in there that was really pushing a lot of limits. So I do think that we're in an interesting place that painters, I think there's places to go with it in figurative painting and abstract painting, but maybe that's an old idea, like a modern idea of the avant-garde that's not relevant to, I don't know.
Well, I think for the four of you, we're using technology and I'm not. So I use no technology.
You're using no technology, but the idea of putting like something leaning against a wall like that is super inventive. So it's really more about invention. To me, it's not about necessarily if
Which
you're going to
fits-
use technology. It's
That
more
fits
like,
more of the Otis attitude that I've been there 2.5 years. I'm graduating this December. So I think that kind of idea of invention and like really going off the wall and looking at liminal spaces between paintings and sculptures is also just an interesting way. And I like the computer, the AI and everything. It just, in my work, it hasn't been helpful.
Yeah, I think it's just a tool that we'll see. Before it kills us all, my God, there's some cool shit you can do.
That's
right.
But actually, you know, what you're doing, because you come back to the work after the AI has done stuff.
Well, yeah, I can
That's-
describe
That's
you
what
guys how I
that's
do what
what
I do, but
that's what saves it.
Oh yeah, no, I'm trying to do something completely like
Your work is a different level.
it's. I'll explain it whenever.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, what I'm doing basically is when these AI image generators first came up, I started seeing people writing in prompts and making, you write a unicorn riding a cowboy on Mars, and it comes up with a cute picture of a unicorn. And I thought, Jesus, I wonder if you could use my own work as a feed. So I just started inputting I use my own work as data, my paintings, I make a lot of ceramics, a lot of drawings, and I start throwing them in there, and it comes up with imagery that is really odd and strange, and I make little sculptures and take pictures of them and give it to the AI, and the AI comes back, and it's all my own work. So then I print out parts of it that are based on my pictures, and I use those as collage elements, and then I start adding paint and fabric and all manner of materials to kind of take a digital thing and make it analog, make it in the real world. So there's these, I hope they're combinations of like artifice and old school painting.
Well, that's the fun thing, looking at it. And kind
Well,
of
yeah, that's
deciphering that.
Right, there's a lot of artificial intelligence, AI generated art is basically people prompt something, it makes a picture, and then they frame it. And that's, to me, super boring.
I was thinking of it as like the synthesizer, like when they first invented synthesizers, I think the idea was to replace like an orchestra or a big horn section. So that
100%.
in the studio, but it became more interesting as just this weird
Those are
noise
the
machine.
weird shit.
Right, and so the weird noises that came out of these different, machines became actually more interesting.
Well, they thought drum machines would get rid of drummers,
Yeah.
which it never did, but it's created, technology is, something like AI is just here to stay. So for artists, I don't think old school painting's going anywhere, but I think as artists, they can take it and use it in interesting ways if they choose. It's not better or worse, it's just another sort of tool like Photoshop or even a projector, or, we just use whatever, sewing machine's a tool.
So how does your collage on the computer become this?
Well, their parts are printed out, are literally printed and adhered to the surface. And then I go in with paint. Sometimes I use airbrush and I use different materials. I use wax, like encaustic and different things. So I'm trying to take that kind of digital quality and make it a thing, an object. And the shape part helps that, I think, that it becomes like a sculptural. And the newer ones I'm adding ceramics to, like literally ceramic appendages.
So these are collages and then paintings.
They're collage and
that are
paint.
developed
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah.
And so they're
all
those are
sorts
the
of
starting
things.
point. and you go
It's a
from
starting point, yeah. And there are all sorts of like, I want to make it where you can't tell what's digital, what's me, what's the machine, but somebody said to me, why don't you mix one of your pieces with a Picasso, but that would defeat the whole point of it. The whole point is me collaborating with me.
Well, I'm curious because, we've been talking about how painting is now and how it's evolved and grown. I wonder about how much you really think it's all evolutionary and doing things new, and is it forever going on to doing things new beyond what's been done with abstract expressions? And then that whole notion of, as an artist, are you venturing forth with the idea, are how much is it self-exploration? And you simply, the question, you start with a blank canvas, or you start with something, but you start reacting to what's there, and those reactions are who you are and what you are,
Right.
and what's distinctive about whatever it is you're doing.
And every artist uses different things. Like some people just like to just put a blank canvas on and then whatever they feel at the moment they throw on, and that's one way. For me, this is a new way. I mean, I've made thousands of paintings, old school way, and this is a new way to get like this. And it's like I start talking to this machine. I mean, it's really creepy. I feel like I have this relationship with this thing that it and I are, and I just say, okay, well, here we go.
You don't need a therapist.
I don't think, well, you know, ChatGPT, the talking kind, that is wild. Because I've had conversations with talking ChatGPT that are just trippy. Yes.
But anyway, so I love the idea that this is all self-referential. This is.
Oh, it's completely self-referential.
Cycling.
Yeah. And when I wanted to do something, like I want something shiny, I'll build a sculpture out of foil and take a picture of it, and then give it that picture of foil and give it one of my old paintings that was all paint, and it'll just go, "Ugh." And it'll come up with this weird, like, shiny thing. Oh man, that was so wild.
Yeah, isn't that always the problem for artists, is like that point where you start imitating yourself? Like both musical artists and I guess visual artists too, they can get to this place where everything just becomes rote or whatever.
Yeah.
And so this is in a way, it's like you're challenging that in a way that's
Challenging it, and it's it's what you want to do as an artist, just sort of keep asking, so you don't become formulaic. Tim here is an artist that I've known forever, and he went to Cal Arts too, and I think Tim is always, I don't know if he knows where Tim ever over there, but he's always like infused, if this one you think you figured him out, he does something completely different. And I think that's very brave for an artist to do that, because it's really easy to fall into a kind of mannered, same old way of working.
It's also very brave of the gallery.
It's very brave of the gallery to show them too. Oh, I've been, yeah.
And now we're talking about Rosamund, because she went through, 4 or 5 different stylistic.
Well, Rosamund was really great about just diving in, thinking like an artist, not a dealer.
So when you were at school, David, did your professors talk to you about not being formulaic?
I went to Cal Arts and they didn't even like painting. So they were like, which forced me to really think about what even painting was. And I remember coming out, building this painting and making sort of this abstract painting and being like, what do you think? And one of the teachers, and I said, the edges don't seem to be working. He said, well, just saw them off. And that started me down the road of shaped art. But it was just, they just thought always outside the box. And I don't even think they liked painting very much. So it kind of put you on the defensive, which was kind of cool, because, you didn't.
So you were already
already
unpopular anyway.
Yeah, you were.
But actually, we use the term formulaic, and I remember that was part of my education. I remember my professor, Kelly Elgar, I could hear him saying, you don't go into there's no formula for what you're doing.
No, there is no formula.
If you were being formulaic, you were in trouble.
Well, artists find vocabularies that they use over and over again. You get chops, and you use your chops to do things, but you have to always check yourself. Is somebody falling into this pattern?
No, and I remember there was actually a Deacon show at UCLA. It was Prince when I was a graduate student, and I remember he wrote on one of his prints, "Same goddamn formula." So he was actually also upset at himself because he felt
he went through a bunch of
he was
different.
repeating himself.
Right, exactly, and that's what I think that the.
So I really, that voice in my head said, don't be formulaic.
But the marketplace rewards formulaic thinking, so you're in a sort of a tough spot. I mean, I think that's why artists teach, if they can, is just to free themselves without even having to worry about selling a work of art. Not that you make any money teaching, but
Right.
I don't know.
Okay, Dena, let's hear a little bit more about your work and,
Well, my work kind of is a little bit different.
well, and the other thing sorry. So when I put this show together with Virginia, who works with me here, we went to Claremont and his work popped out of all the work we saw there. And then she couldn't make it, but I went to Otis and I walked around and I said, oh God, I really like this. I took a couple of photos. Yeah, and I thought she was like 20 something and she's a returning student, but I thought that was such a great thing about like just going. I didn't meet any of the artists. Usually when you go do the grad visits, you meet them, but this time I didn't meet any of them, and it was really a nice serendipitous thing. And then Virginia told me, oh God, she was born so and so, and I thought, oh, okay, well, I love the work, so what does it really matter? But it kind of threw the concept of the show a little bit out of kilter, but ultimately, when you pick work for a show and artist, it's usually more of a gut instinct than the resume or whatever, and ultimately that I think becomes the best show anyway. So even though the show had some parameters, I thought it was very free, and I just wanted to say that before.
Thank you. I think it was actually a really serendipitous situation because my mentor that Carl didn't know is David Lloyd for the last 5 years. And besides from David, I went to Otis and met Cranston, who's Cal Arts, is my mentor, Corey Newkirk, Chicago, Jane Moon, Cal Arts, Curtis Cal Arts, and Benjamin Weissman, I think from CMAY. Those are my main mentors, and especially Meg as a painter. And it's a small world because I feel like David, who's been my mentor, I feel like I came from a Cal Arts. Yes, oh my gosh, is my mentor. I feel like I have a really Cal Arts attitude, which really, it's funny because it kind of, even though I didn't go to Cal Arts, Otis is this incredibly conceptual place. It's really open. It's called, I feel it's like the soft hug of the art world. And I went back there older and after having kids, and I just like going from David to then Otis and just being able to kind of explore this language that had been inside of me for a really long time. And what I got out of it was really an understanding of where my art was going. And I think of my art as kind of a feminist intervention into the male-dominated MX, post-minimalism, like conversations about constantly the male artist. And I think my work is coming in there with a lot of the same energy of a male artist, with the gesture, the grapple, moving the paint, the blowing the paint, and bringing in, different materials. But I think I kind of go even further. I'm trying to take it past the idea of like the average bravado painting into this, almost go to the point of extreme, to almost deconstruct it and then rebuild it back with this intensity on floral motifs, on domesticity. My work is a lot about domesticity, about raising a home. I was a rabbi's wife. And my 10 years were spent making fabulous dinner tables and cooking the best mastival soup you've ever had. And my napkins never matched. I don't see why. And so this domesticity is the backbone of my work. So I have all of these pieces in my head, are formulaic. I draw these abstracted still abstracted landscapes. But then I don't stop when I abstract them. I take them, I obfuscate them. I want to completely take it away and then re-ornate it with more ornate. And I feel that it's even coming off the walls now. My newest work has come off the wall. There's a monolith and it's half of a couch cushion on the back. So that I'm really playing with domesticity and like gestural painting. And then I've also included my ceramics in it, because I like the idea of keeping to build and make more and more depth and more texture and more material. So that's kind of where my process is going, and I'm really like in the process. I graduate in December, and constantly things.
To both of you.
Yeah, it's two pieces of me.
So you said the leaning piece is part of half of a couch cushion?
Well, I have half of them are leaners, which are a spoof on John McCracken and his finish of the slick. I
Right,
don't want to say the word
right.
minimal
Plank,
plain, and so mine is a very feminized plank.
but it's irregular.
It is irregular.
The new ones, I've seen the new ones,
Even more
they're
regular.
freestanding and they look like that on one side and they look like a upholstered on the other, like
Oh.
a couch. But
Stuff.
they're super weird. I mean, they're really interesting.
Because
They just stand out in the room.
These are my leaners. I have leaners, monoliths, and I even have some that are 16 inches off the floor that are paintings. So they're an exploration into the boundaries between abstract expressionism, post-minimalism, feminism, and domesticity.
And for, you
And furniture almost, yeah, furniture, yes.
just can't sit on it, you'll get a butt full of.
Don't sit on it.
It's an ironing board, right?
Uh-huh.
But the irregularity of that is really subtle, which I think is really the strength of it. It's like, oh, it's an ironing board. No, it's not. It's a plank, really a surfboard, no.
No, yeah. And it has
And
flowers
that
on it.
opens it all up
Yeah,
right there.
yeah.
And then it's got all this stuff on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I'm talking about, like take painting and just see where it can take you. because that,
How do you ship it?
Okay, that's really fun, guys, because it's just had a solo show at Shrine, New York, and they got 10 pieces. It is shippable. We just pack it and we put it a long time in a
You fucking drive it.
truck, or I've been known to, if it's a show, I've driven them. And then they ship them, the stores, the galleries are able to ship them somehow. They know how they float them and they know what to do. They can get more
The
places.
things that cost too much money for us.
Well, I guess so, but yeah. But I don't know, I've been getting them myself. Like I get orders on Instagram and I've been able to put them in enough to, maybe not a huge one to Denmark, but I can definitely get my 11 by 14s and my 20 by 25s and, those things. These are a little bit harder.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, hopefully people like them in LA.
Dana?
Yeah.
What kind of materials?
All oil paints, only oil paints. So I'm really obsessed about oil paint, and it's like, it's very important to me, the sensory aspect of the oils and how they maintain the smell and the way they move and they stay wet and how I can layer and layer for years and carve back. So I use oil paints, cold wax, and ceramics. Those are and sometimes spray. Cold wax, which I put in the paint and makes it a little thicker. So that gives it a matte color, and then I use regular oil paint with shiny, and then I use ceramics and spray paint, and I occasionally glitter.
Do you find that some of the paints work better, some of the different brands of paint?
I've learned a lot about paint and making because I know a lot about paint, and I feel like I've even found really good paints for cheap. I found better ways to do it, and now I'm actually thinking of making my own paint with powders because I can make more. But I do find a lot of deals. Thank you. Thank you.
It's expensive too, with good paint, foil paint really adds up.
Especially you have to use a lot of it.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of other things, but I have a lot of oil paint.
I always tell you, try building up with, remember I tell you try building up with
Tells me every
acrylic?
week, and I can't.
And she was like, screw that, like
I
oil
can't-
paint all the way.
I can't pull it back. Once you have acrylic, it's gonna dry and I can't carve it back out and you start.
Yeah.
A lot of this take between 3 and 6 months. With
Do
the
you
layers.
find when it dries, does it change a bit, or?
Yeah, I have learned a lot about when they dry now, I know I put in a gloss on it and I have a matte. And so once they are in the process of drying is when I start to varnish them. And varnish goes pretty quick, so.
Yeah, I had an artist I showed some years back, and he painted quite thick, almost as thick as these. And he had one brand of paint that just worked perfect for him, and forgot what it was,
Oh,
but
wow, to.
But it wouldn't work with other brands. It just was this one brand, I think it was from Italy or Switzerland or something, and it had a real nice
Body.
body to it, at the same time, good color. And so,
I use Charvin for people who want to know. Jerry's Artorama, $18.99, $150.
What was the inspiration for that painting?
So that's, I paint, when I get into painting, I do a lot of drawings, like I said, of still lifes and landscapes and figure painter. I'm trained as a figure landscape still life painter. And so a lot of times they're about landscapes and still lives and forms that I've seen. So I oftentimes will have an idea in my head of like, a landscape was on my head the whole time, and like flowers and gardening and the earth. So sometimes whatever's on my head will come through. Like if I'm perseverating on like flowers for the month and I'm looking at all these landscapes and then I stand in front of there's a good chance you're gonna get some sort of landscape and layers in there. Or if I've been looking at dinnerware, might get a vase in my pot. So I think I'm processing what I see and thinking about, and really what's capturing my opinion what's capturing my ideas about painting and form at the moment.
So you're combining landscape and a little bit of
I don't think
still life in there, or is
I
it?
think it's all together. I think they're all just part of it. There's a wheel, there's a landscape, there's flowers, there definitely is some sort of like inner earthwork. But I don't define it that much. It's almost like these are the stored images after like, that have keep coming back up as core images that I want to work with. And then a lot of it is really letting go. These are to let go for the first, week and just keep exploring without really preconceived ideas is where I try to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where it comes from, me just standing there.
Yeah.
And like responding to the paint, what I put on. But there's always in the back of my head the things I'm thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Great one, great painting. I really love that painting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
it's for sale.
My artist husband must have loved it.
Yeah, it's not far than that.
How do you know when they're finished?
Oh, they feel finished. That's it. Because I will call David, and how many times have I sent you a picture, and until I feel it, Dave will be like, it's good, or it's not good.
All I've done with Dena is encourage her to just keep going. Just keep doing what you're doing. It's great. Just keep doing what you're doing.
And then I figure
Keep doing
out
what
it
you're doing.
feels complete in my body. It literally feels done. And until it feels done, I'm like, can't let it go. But the minute it feels done, I can like somehow walk away. Not a little obsessed, you can tell.
Any other questions?
Come on, you guys. You want to have some?
I have a question for Greg, but maybe, anybody else want to address that story too. I was going to ask you, do you consider yourself a painter or a process artist? Or somewhere in between? I mean, because you talked a lot about, the research that you do and hiking and coming back to the studio and your photos and then cropping things out and then taping and you said that was a
I
really
think,
important part of how you work. So
yeah,
you
I
say
think-
you're a process artist first and painter second, or?
Definitely in my early days would consider myself a process painter, and I went to Claremont, which was very much at the time where all the process painters were. And we were all into having a nice way of making a painting, and that was the painting, the way you made it. But there was one of the artists I was looking at in when I was in grad school was Jonathan Lasker, and he was like this painter that everybody hated, and I hated him too. And so I realized that I was actually thinking about his work more than the artists who I thought I liked, like Sean Scully or Bryce Martin, or whatever it was. And I thought, well, why is it? Why is it getting under my skin? And it's like I started looking more at his work and realized that there was a kind of wrongness to it. But the more I looked at it, I realized, and I remember talking to David Nagel about this because David said he tried to curate him into a show on abstraction. And Jonathan Lasker said, no, I'm not an abstract painter. And we would all look at Lasker's work and think, well, he's an abstract painter. But if you actually look at his work, he's bringing all these sort of elemental pictorial devices into the painting. And like, he has, it's like, it's always been an abstraction, right? You're supposed to destroy the figure-ground relationship. And, but he has it in his paintings. There's like a figure and there's a background. And in the background is a pattern. And that pattern gets smaller as it gets to the top of the painting, implying depth, and things like that. It's kind of like they're pictorial paintings in the dumbest kind of way. And it's almost like, I remember thinking about like that with my own work is that in the 90s, like I said, it was sort of spin to still moment where everything seemed like it had already been done. And every kind of mark you could make as an abstract painter had already been made. And it's like, so how do you deal with it? And one way to deal with it was just to have all the parts together in one painting, like there was a British painter, Fiona Ray. Yeah, who kind of did this. She'd just take all these different styles and bash them together. Yeah. Or I think of like the musician Beck, who put this album out called Odelay, where he did the same thing. He took all the cliches of genre and kind of bashed them together to create this new kind of hybrid music. And that was kind of, to me, that's sort of what was going on in the 90s. It was kind of like, as we hit that, not only a finishing moment of going from one century to another, but from one millennial to another, it was like this, everything, there was this feeling like, how do you go forward? And so the way I was thinking of it was like, okay, there's marks, all these marks have been made already. Well, that's great. I don't have to come up with a new kind of mark. I can just go and, almost like going to Home Depot, just grab this part and this material and that thing and use it to assemble something. And so like in Claremont, what I was doing is I was sort of like, almost like pretending to be like an architect and sort of like, I remember reading an interview with, I'm blanking on his Curie. And he was saying, well, when I was in college, it's like, I hung out with the painters and like when I make a building, I'm always approaching it like a painting. And I thought, well, if he can do that, then I can be a painter that pretends like I'm an architect. And so I would kind of like, when I make the painting, I would think of it as like, I'm an architect and I have my imaginary client and I have my imaginary contractors and we're working and we're fighting and arguing and we're eventually come up with this composition that was like this abstract kind of form, but it was, I would say that this is architecture. This is like a condominium, or this is a supermarket, or something like that. And it was a way of just kind of reusing the forms to create something that's actually pictorial. And after I got out of Claremont, I kind of zoomed in on Ikebana, because Ikebana to me seemed like the perfect way to do this, because it had, it was kind of like this, like I said, it's like supposed to be about nature, but it's very designed. And it involves different parts, and so I could approach it that way. And so it was sort of more and more I was moving towards the pictorial, I guess is what I'm saying, is that, as like where I would look at, say, the Impressionists, they all studied like pictorial painting, but they were moving more towards the immediacy of the mark. And then that kind of led to post-impression, which led to Cubism, which led to all these other abstract things. I almost felt like I was at the opposite end of that. I studied with all these abstract painters and I went through all these different phases of abstraction. But now, what do I do with all those things? I started moving to create a picture out of all.
Well, how do you see Charles Gaines? Because he uses a system to make trees. And he's a conceptual artist. See, I'd call him a conceptual artist, period.
Oh, really?
How dare you? Yeah, because I think that you use a system I was thinking of Charles Gaines the first time I ever saw your stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I studied with him.
Yeah, well, I didn't on this stuff. But the idea of, you know, building something out of a system as opposed to just going out in the world and set up a easel and we're gonna paint a tree, because he probably knows Lucas, right?
Yes.
Paints, but he does it old school way, he just paints a tree,
Right.
right? So, I mean, this idea of using systems or colliding different disciplines together is like the way forward, I think, with art, actually using different systems to get to a place.
Right.
I think that's the way.
And go back to your question, I can't really define it as I'm this first and that second, and it's like, I feel like I'm all these things, right? We're all these things, right? Nobody's like just, one thing or another. It's like, we're all very complex. And so, yeah, process, yeah, conceptual, yeah, expressionist, I mean, all those things, right? I don't want to be one thing. And I think that would be an oversimplification to kind of just make my work about like being one thing. So.
You're open to, other parts of what it is that you're trying to get at. I mean, so basically, well, I don't want to dominate, but all of you kind of talked about your background with where you went to school and who you worked with and what was going on at the time and what was acceptable and what was not acceptable. And I mean, I would hope that at some point with everyone, artists, you end up like throwing that aside and letting what you're interested in come out and just focusing on that, and the rest of it be damned. Who cares? Who cares? This was the rule. Or this
Well, we're all products of our, whether you went to a more traditional school or you went to a more conceptual school. But you're right, ultimately you grow out of it, but it's still there, because you're sort of trained to think about art in a certain way. Like, I think, I sat in with John Baldessari. I was an undergrad, so I didn't officially, but you could sit on his class, and he had such an open-minded view of what art was or wasn't. There was no thing as art isn't this, it's just, can be anything. So that sticks in there. And I think I went to school with Rachel Lackowitz, and she's a product of Cal Arts. So she has that kind of view of art, I think, is super open-ended. And I think that, we're all products of that kind of.
I mean, I think that's what, what's interesting about what an artist makes. That's what it is. When you put all that aside and then you just, abandon all of that and.
Well, but we're all products of our childhood, our education, our parents, our living in LA. It all kind of ends in.
Don't forget our genes.
Our genes, our actually a way our brains think.
I mean, because actually, you think about every school that everybody went to. I mean, we all had like some faculty that we connected with, and some faculty we didn't. And ultimately, even if whenever in every class, you look at everybody, they might be doing a still life, let's say. And everybody's got their own personality going into it, and you can see that in everybody's work. And
Oh, hell yeah. I saw some work I did when I was like 10 years old, and it kind of looks like what I'm making now. It's diamond, right? Here you go, this is it. We take all that with us. I mean, I'm very thankful to, I think we all went to pretty good schools. The way they teach art now is way more open-ended. In the old days, you went to you studied under a master, and
you were told exactly how to
and something, and you sometimes ended up just copying them,
So so I think, that's why I look back at UCLA and I think, good, because they taught me, find your own path. And I think that's what, and that sounds like what every school does, really, now.
Well,
at least the school.
Yeah.
Good schools.
I think teaching art is super duper hard. I don't know how you even do it in some ways, even though I've taught a long time. I think it's just such a odd thing to do, because ultimately, like you said, there's this spark of individuality that comes forth and you just sort of nurture it along, rather than you can't tell people what to do. And the last thing you want to do as a teacher is try to get them to make what you make.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I always think you want people to find out who they are. The job is to discover who you are yourself, what you really want to see, how can you make what you really want to see.
In your head.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're at the end, and any other questions?
I think you
Time
did a
for
good
lunch.
job in
Thank you.
curating.
All right, thank you so much.